Luck is one of the most misunderstood ideas in competitive fighting games. Not because players are ignorant, not because they refuse responsibility, but because luck feels like the only explanation that survives scrutiny without causing damage. Most players don't say they lost because of luck casually. They say it after thinking, after replaying the moment, after convincing themselves they did everything right. That's when luck becomes attractive. Luck isn't blamed when someone gets completely overwhelmed, it's blamed when the match was close, when it almost went the other way, when the outcome feels unjust rather than obvious. Luck lives in narrow margins. There's a subtle difference between losing badly and losing incorrectly. Bad losses hurt the ego. Incorrect losses threaten identity. Luck protects identity. In fighting games, effort is visible. Time invested is visible, practice hours are visible, but understanding is not. So when visible effort doesn't translate into visible results, the mind fills the gap. With randomness, with chance, with it just didn't go my way. Luck is socially acceptable. If you say you lost because you misunderstood something, people question you. If you say you lost because of luck, people nod. Luck ends conversations politely. Watch how often luck appears after commitment, after players after the player chose to engage, after the player trusted their read, after a player felt certain. Luck arrives when certainty collapses. This is important. Luck is rarely mentioned before a decision, almost never during a decision, almost always after the result. That timing matters because luck isn't really about the game, it's about reconciliation, reconciling belief with outcome. When a risky decision works, it's intuition. When it fails, it's luck. When pressure breaks an opponent, it's control. When pressure backfires, it's randomness. The same behavior is interpreted differently based on outcome. This asymmetry quietly reshapes how players understand the game. Wins reinforce belief, losses dissolve inquiry. Over time, the mental archive becomes distorted. Skill feels consistent, outcomes feel volatile. That's where the illusion takes hold, not because the game is random, but because perception is incomplete. Fighting games compress information aggressively. Inputs resolve faster than conscious thought, decisions overlap, consequences appear before intention is remembered. By the time the player asks what happened, the moment has already passed. Luck fills the silence. This is why two players can watch the same interaction and disagree completely. One sees chaos, the other sees inevitability. Not because one is smarter, but because one noticed something the other didn't. Luck thrives where awareness ends. What players call randomness is often untracked casualty. Things that matter, but never consciously register. Spacing drift, tempo shifts, emotional leakage, pattern exposure, none of these announce themselves, so they get erased. And erased causes become random outcomes. Luck becomes more convincing as players improve. Beginners blame mistakes, intermediate players blame execution, advanced players blame chance. Not because advanced players are delusional, but because the remaining blind spots are subtle, harder to name, harder to admit. At higher levels, the game stops teaching you directly. It assumes awareness. And when awareness lags behind complexity, luck becomes the explanation. This is why luck feels mature. It sounds measured, it sounds honest, it sounds like someone who understands variance. I played well, it just didn't go my way. That sentence is seductive and dangerous. Because luck doesn't demand reinterpretation. It doesn't ask what was invited. It doesn't ask what was enabled. It doesn't ask what conditions were created long before the moment exploded. It closes the case gently. And closure feels good after loss. But closure without clarity creates stagnation that feels like bad fortune. Players say they're improving, they say they're sharper, they say they're doing everything right, and yet the same outcomes repeat. So luck becomes a recurring villain. At that point, luck stops being neutral. It becomes corrosive. The most dangerous thing about luck is not that it's wrong, is that it feels complete. Luck doesn't leave loose ends. It doesn't invite deeper questions. It doesn't provoke discomfort. It ends inquiry. Think about how often players say, "There was nothing I could do." That sentence sounds calm. It sounds composed. It sounds emotionally healthy, but it quietly removes responsibility without resolving uncertainty. Responsibility without clarity is uncomfortable. Clarity without responsibility is useless. Luck offers neither and pretends it offered both. This is why players who rely on luck explanations plateau together. They don't stagnate mechanically, they stagnate interpretively. Their questions stop evolving. Over time, they stop noticing new things. Not because nothing new happens, but because luck already has an answer ready. Luck becomes a habit of explanation and habits harden. There's another reason luck feels convincing in fighting games. The systems themselves are opaque. They don't explain why something worked, they only show that it did. Outcomes are binary, understanding is not. The game never tells you you are partially correct. It never tells you this worked for reasons you didn't intend. So players assume intention equals cause, and when intention doesn't map cleanly to result, randomness fills the gap. This creates a subtle inversion. Players believe they control what they understand, and luck controls everything else. That's backwards. Understanding usually lags behind control, not the other way around. But luck disguises that gap. It makes incomplete awareness feel like external volatility. The illusion deepens because fighting games reward confidence. Decisive actions look correct, hesitation looks weak. So when decisive actions fail, luck becomes an excuse. It preserves the belief that decisiveness itself was correct. This is why luck explanations spike after confident losses, not desperate ones. There's also a social incentive. Luck is harder to argue against. If someone says they misplayed, others can disagree. If someone says they were unlucky, debate feels inappropriate. Luck shuts down critique. And once critique disappears, growth slows invisibly. The irony is, luck explanations feel humble, but they quietly assert something dangerous. That the outcome was independent of the player. And once that belief takes root, improvement becomes cosmetic. Hours increase, intensity increases, frustration increases, but interpretation does not. This is where players feel curtained. They feel like the game refuses to reward them. They feel like progress stalls without reason and luck becomes a villain again. But luck is not an enemy, it's a placeholder. A placeholder for causes that haven't been named yet. A placeholder for awareness that hasn't been formed. A placeholder for responsibility that feels too heavy to carry without instructions. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. There exists a space between control and chaos. A space where outcomes are influenced, not guaranteed. Where responsibility exists without certainty. Where cause doesn't look like intention. That space is uncomfortable. It offers no reassurance, no excuses, no recipes, only accountability without guidance. Most players don't want to live there because that space doesn't feel fair, it doesn't feel stable, and it doesn't reward effort in obvious ways. So luck becomes a story instead, not because it's accurate, but because it's survivable. The illusion of luck isn't that randomness exists, randomness does exist. The illusion is that randomness explains enough. Because once luck fails as an explanation, something else replaces it. Something quieter, something heavier, something that doesn't end conversations. And that replacement doesn't announce itself, it just removes comfort. You stop saying unlucky, but you also stop feeling certain. And certainty was doing a lot of emotional work. That's the real cost of abandoning luck. Not more control, but less illusion. And without illusion, every outcome feels closer, more personal, more connected, less dismissible. That's not empowering, that's destabilizing. Which is why most people cling to luck, not because they're wrong, but because they're human. Luck is the last refuge of certainty, when understanding hasn't caught up yet. And once you see that, luck never feels innocent again. Not because the game becomes predictable, but because randomness stops being the end of the story. It becomes the beginning of something heavier, something unresolved, something that doesn't explain itself.